Girl, police say, was beaten to death. The crime has shocked the upstate as so many are heartbroken to learn the details of 3-year-old Victoria Rose's death. Ariel and Jerry Robinson are now charged with homicide by child abuse.
The evidence in this case is that the substance of the charge is that Ariel Robinson is charged with causing the death of a child under the age of 11 by child abuse or neglect under circumstances that exhibit an extreme indifference to human life. And then you will hear the devastating series of events that go from Tori trying to eat some pancakes to a child beaten to a pulp.
We were just here as representation for Victoria and that she was.
January 14th, 2021. A frantic 911 call shattered the silence of an ordinary afternoon in Simpsonville, South Carolina. A woman claimed her 3-year-old daughter was choking on water. But when paramedics arrived, what they found wasn't a child gasping for air. It was the brutalized body of a little girl, her skin blackened with deep bruises, her abdomen discolored from internal bleeding, and her tiny frame barely clinging to life. A firefighter whispered in horror, "These injuries. No fall or accident could have done this. Someone beat her, methodically." That child's name was Victoria Rose Smith. She was adopted into a home praised as ideal by the state, raised by a woman who once won a national cooking show and presented herself as a loving mother of 5. What no one saw, or perhaps chose not to see, was the truth hidden behind her online smile, a truth that ended with a little girl lying broken on a bedroom floor, whispering, "I love you," to the man who stood by and let it happen. Today I'm telling you the story of Victoria, how a child taken from her birth mother for her own safety was placed into a home that became her death sentence. Let's begin with who Victoria really was, before the system failed her. Her name was Victoria Rose Smith, born on March 27, 2017, in Greenville, South Carolina. From the moment she entered the world, her presence radiated warmth, with chubby cheeks, bright, curious eyes, and a laugh that could melt the hardest heart. Victoria wasn't just a baby. She was a little light in the lives of everyone around her. Victoria, affectionately called Tori, was the youngest of 3 siblings. She had 2 older brothers, Jaden and Colton, who instantly fell in love with their baby sister. Together, they were a loud, joyful trio, playing, giggling, and sometimes causing mischief as children do. In family photos from those early days, Victoria beams with innocence. One picture shows her reaching for her mother's necklace with wide eyes. Another, in a fluffy pink dress, captures her fascination with cupcakes. She adored the color pink. She loved shiny things, pretty clothes, and styling her hair. She could spend hours dressing up, pretending to be a princess, and twirling around in front of a mirror with unfiltered glee. She loved dolls, toy cars, building blocks. She played with them all at once. To Victoria, every object was a reason to imagine, to laugh, to feel alive. Birthdays were sacred. For a girl so young, she understood that a cake with candles, balloons, and singing meant she was loved. Her joy wasn't just about sweets or gifts. It was about feeling seen, celebrated. She'd clap her hands in delight, her cheeks glowing, her eyes sparkling like someone who knew somehow that this moment was hers. Food, too, brought her joy. Whether it was homemade pancakes or a bite of chocolate, Victoria saw meals as more than nourishment. They were moments of family, of comfort, of togetherness. She never rushed when she ate. She took her time, savoring each bite like it was part of a happy ritual. No one could have imagined that this simple, innocent behavior, eating slowly, would one day become the reason for her death. Victoria wasn't just beautiful. She was spirited, sweet, sassily charming. Everyone who met her remembered something. The way she tilted her head when she smiled, the tiny dimple on her left cheek, or how she called her mother Mama in that soft baby voice. Her joy was infectious. Her love was pure. And that made her suffering and her ending all the more unbearable. Let's go back now to understand the family she was born into and the system that took her away. Victoria Rose Smith was born into a modest but loving home. Her mother, Cassandra Cassie Smith, was young, exhausted, and doing her best. With 3 children under one roof and limited resources, the days were long, the nights often sleepless. But there was no shortage of love. The family wasn't wealthy. Cassie and her partner Bradley lived paycheck to paycheck. But they created a world where birthday cakes were homemade, laughter echoed in the living room, and bedtime meant storybooks and warm cuddles. Cassie captured it all. Victoria's first smile, her first steps, her chubby little hands grasping at toys. In those photographs, you don't see danger. You see a mother cherishing her children. But the system saw something else. When Victoria was born, a small trace of marijuana was detected in her system, an automatic red flag for South Carolina's Department of Social Services, DSS. It didn't matter that Victoria was healthy, safe, and clearly loved. What followed was a grueling cycle of home visits, inspections, and mounting pressure. Cassie tried to comply, meeting every requirement, attending every appointment. But the scrutiny only grew. Then came the moment that changed everything. One night, after being awake for nearly 24 hours, Cassie collapsed into sleep on the couch. The baby had cried through the night. Her sons needed breakfast, and she still had to get ready for work. While she slept, the older boys, worried by the silence, ran to a neighbor's house. The neighbor, alarmed, called the police. Social services took it as the final straw. It didn't matter that the children were unharmed. It didn't matter that Cassie had simply reached the breaking point every overwhelmed parent fears. What she needed was support. What she got instead was a clipboard and a pen. "Sign the papers," the social worker told her. "We'll find your children a better family. They'll be safer." Cassie, terrified of losing her children forever in court, signed the voluntary surrender. In that moment, with shaking hands, she unknowingly signed away the fate of her daughter. Victoria and her brothers were placed with the West family, experienced foster parents who offered stability and love. There, Victoria thrived. She played, she laughed, she blossomed into the princess she believed herself to be. Her cheeks filled out again, her eyes sparkled. Cassie still visited during this time, and Victoria would run into her arms, giggling, calling out, "Mama!" There was still hope for reunification. It felt possible. But in 2020, DSS made a final, irreversible decision. They were looking for a permanent adoptive placement. And on paper, the Robinsons looked like a dream. Ariel and Jerry Robinson, a young, charismatic, church-going couple, offered to adopt all 3 children. Ariel had a master's degree from Clemson. Jerry was calm, steady. They had 2 biological sons already. To the state, this was the perfect ending. To those who had truly known Victoria, it was the beginning of a nightmare. Let's now look at what happened inside the Robinson home. In March 2020, Victoria and her brothers moved into the Robinson household on Selwood Circle in Simpsonville, South Carolina. At first glance, everything looked like a fairy tale. Ariel Robinson was vibrant and charming, a former comedian, podcast host, and soon-to-be national TV personality. That same year, she won Worst Cooks in America on Food Network and claimed the $25,000 grand prize. In interviews, she glowed with pride, calling herself a mother of 5, celebrating her blended family. Photos flooded her social media, smiling children, family outings, holiday decorations. To DSS, it was proof the system had worked. But behind the camera, the fairy tale was a fabrication. And Victoria, once the joyful, expressive girl in pink dresses, began to fade. Over the months, small signs emerged. Her cheeks thinned, her eyes dulled. In one photo, there was a faint bruise on her wrist. In another, a red mark on her neck. But these details were buried beneath smiling captions and cheerful hashtags. COVID-19 would play a devastating role. Social workers, unable to conduct in-person inspections, relied on virtual check-ins. Ariel knew how to stage a video call. No one saw the truth. No one asked the right questions. By January 2021, the change in Victoria was undeniable. She was quiet, nervous, cautious with her words. The energy that once lit up a room was gone. But it was on January 13th, just one day before her death, that the mask truly slipped. That morning, the family was late for church. Victoria, eating breakfast in the car, accidentally vomited on her dress. At church, a witness saw her standing in a bathroom in only her underwear, shivering as Ariel washed her dress in the sink. When asked if Victoria was sick, Ariel smirked and said, "No, she just eats too much and throws up. It's a game." Later, she told the child, "Girls who throw up deserve to be cold." Nobody intervened. At home, that afternoon, Jerry bathed Victoria and noticed a large, dark bruise on her lower back. He said nothing, did nothing. A moment that could have changed everything simply passed. The next morning, January 14th, 2021, would be Victoria's last. The older boys went to school. Victoria was alone with Ariel. Jerry was working outside in the yard. She sat down to eat pancakes, too slowly. For Ariel, this wasn't childhood. It was disobedience. Jerry later testified that he heard everything, the yelling, the crying, the sounds of blows. For over an hour, he stayed outside, gardening, avoiding, pretending not to hear. When he finally walked in, he found Ariel standing over Victoria, holding a belt. The child lay motionless on the floor, barely breathing. "You went too far," Jerry said, but he didn't call for help, not yet. They bathed her in Epsom salt, trying to reduce the swelling. Jerry went to buy Tylenol. Victoria was dying, and her parents were treating her injuries like a routine fever. Lying on the bed, her tiny body broken, Victoria whispered, "I love you." Jerry would later tell the court those were the last words he heard from her. By 2:16 p.m., Ariel made the 911 call, claiming the girl had choked on water. But first responders knew better. Her bruises weren't from a fall. Her body was black and blue, covered in cuts, contusions, and internal trauma so extensive it resembled a car crash victim. Victoria died at 5:05 p.m., surrounded by doctors who couldn't save her. 5 days later, on the very day her adoption was to be finalized, Ariel and Jerry Robinson were arrested for homicide by child abuse. But what happened after that? When first responders arrived at the Robinson home on January 14th, 2021, it took them seconds to realize this was no accident. Victoria's small body bore the unmistakable signs of prolonged, brutal abuse. Her abdomen was black and blue. Her inner thighs showed clustered bruises. Her face was pale, lips dry, and she was barely breathing. One firefighter whispered, "These aren't from a fall. These are the injuries of a beating." Victoria was rushed to Prisma Health Greenville Memorial Hospital, where doctors fought to save her. But what they found inside was devastating. Internal bleeding, ruptured blood vessels, and blunt force trauma so severe that it resembled what's seen in high-speed vehicle collisions. Despite all efforts, at 5:05 p.m., Victoria Rose Smith was pronounced dead. The case immediately escalated from suspected child endangerment to homicide by child abuse. The following day, Ariel and Jerry Robinson were arrested. When questioned, Ariel claimed Victoria bruised easily and had sensitive skin. She blamed her biological sons, saying one had anger issues and often kicked the little girl. But the evidence said otherwise. The coroner later testified that he had never seen such severe internal injuries in a child so young. Medical experts confirmed the trauma occurred within an hour of her death. Coinciding with the time, Jerry said he heard Ariel screaming and hitting Victoria. In April 2022, Jerry Robinson pleaded guilty to aiding and abetting homicide by child abuse. He admitted he knew about Ariel's violent punishments. He described how Ariel beat Victoria with belts and wooden paddles, especially when the girl ate too slowly. He even confessed that he sometimes took food from Victoria's plate to help her avoid being punished. He testified that on the morning of Victoria's death, he heard everything, her cries, the beatings, but chose to stay outside and do yard work instead of stepping in. Then came the trial of Ariel Robinson in May 2022. On the stand, Ariel reversed course. She now claimed Jerry was the real abuser. She said he had anger issues and was left alone with the children. But the jury wasn't convinced. Her stand-up comedy clips surfaced, videos where she made jokes about hitting children in the throat. Her public image as a sweet, progressive mother crumbled under the weight of her own contradictions. One of the most heartbreaking moments came when a pediatric intensive care doctor testified. These injuries were not survivable. The level of force used tore tissue from tissue. This was not discipline. This was torture. After 4 days of testimony and only 90 minutes of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict: guilty. Ariel Robinson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jerry Robinson received 20 years with credit for time served. Food Network immediately removed the season of Worst Cooks in America that featured Ariel from all platforms. And in early 2025, when Ariel filed for appeal, the court denied her request for a new trial. She remains incarcerated, having received multiple disciplinary write-ups for refusing orders and sexual misconduct while behind bars. But beyond the courtroom, Victoria's story sparked a deeper outrage, one aimed not just at her killers, but at the system that handed her over to them. The news of Victoria Rose Smith's death spread like wildfire, and with it came a rising wave of collective grief, outrage, and disbelief. A beautiful 3-year-old girl, taken from her biological mother in the name of protection, had been placed in the arms of a killer. The betrayal felt systemic, deliberate, and unforgivable. In communities across South Carolina, especially in Greenville and Simpsonville, the public demanded answers. How could a woman so publicly celebrated, so extensively vetted, brutally murder a child without anyone noticing? Why hadn't DSS intervened, especially after signs of abuse began surfacing in photos? And why were social worker visits still conducted remotely, months into the pandemic? These questions didn't go unanswered. Michelle Herbst, Victoria's aunt, refused to let her niece's death fade into a statistic. She became the voice Victoria no longer had, pressing lawmakers, appearing on television, and organizing grassroots support for what would become Victoria's Law. This proposed legislation in South Carolina aimed to strengthen oversight of foster and adoptive homes, with one crucial change. Unannounced, in-person inspections would become mandatory, even after adoptions were finalized. No more video calls, no more blind trust in appearances. If someone had walked into the Robinson home without warning, Michelle said, Victoria would still be alive. The proposed bill gained support across political lines. Advocates for children's welfare, church leaders, former foster parents, and even DSS insiders called for reform. Media outlets nationwide picked up the story, not just because of its horror, but because it exposed a fragile truth. The system designed to protect children can sometimes be the engine of their destruction. Online, the hashtag #JohnJusticeForVictoria trended for weeks. Thousands posted tributes, shared Victoria's photos, and lit virtual candles in her memory. Others came forward with their own stories of lost custody, broken reunifications, and children placed in dangerous homes. Victoria had become a symbol, a name that cut through bureaucracy and reminded the world what was at stake. At her funeral in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, Cassie placed a teddy bear on her daughter's small grave. The state that had taken her child in life had nearly kept her in death, forcing the family to fight even for the right to bury her. And still, Victoria's story wasn't over, because every time someone said her name, every time a new foster family was visited without notice, every time a lawmaker spoke up, Victoria lived again, in purpose, in protection, in memory. But what is the lasting message of this tragedy? What does Victoria's short life leave behind? What would you do if you saw a child trembling in a church bathroom, half naked, shivering, afraid? Would you stop? Would you ask questions? Would you intervene? Because in Victoria's final days, people saw, and still, no one did. Victoria Rose Smith lived for 3 years, 9 months, and 18 days. She brought color into the world, pink tutus, glitter shoes, dollhouse dreams. She giggled with her brothers, she twirled in princess dresses, she called her mother Mama, and clapped her hands when candles were lit for her birthday. She was a child in every sense of the word, vulnerable, trusting, bursting with light. And that light was extinguished, not in some dark alley, not at the hands of a stranger, but in a suburban home, behind a camera-ready smile, while the system watched from afar. Let that sink in. We often tell ourselves that abuse happens in other families, in broken places. But the truth is, it can hide behind perfect resumes, charming smiles, and Instagram photos with filters. It hides where oversight is weak, where convenience replaces caution, where no one is willing to ask, "Are you okay?" Victoria's death is not just a tragedy. It's a call to action. If you work in child welfare, be the voice that doesn't ignore the quiet signs. If you're a neighbor, a teacher, a churchgoer, don't look away. Ask questions, insist on answers, trust your instincts, because silence can be deadly. Victoria didn't get the chance to grow up. She will never start kindergarten, never lose her first tooth, never learn to ride a bike, but she can still save lives if we let her story be more than just a headline. At Crimeline, we believe in telling these stories not for shock, but for remembrance, for justice, for change. So, if this story moved you, share it. Talk about Victoria. Say her name. Say it out loud. Because no child should ever whisper, "I love you," with their final breath, only to be answered with silence. Rest in peace, little angel.